You know, there are times where I wonder if the lies that people are putting out are so utterly detached from reality that they're mentally ill, or if not mentally ill, at the very least, that whether they really believe other people are believing them. And I think that maybe they are mentally ill if they believe that other people are believing what they're saying. So is such with the Jamal Khashoggi case. A man walks into an embassy. The man walks into the embassy because he needs to get proof that he's not, that he doesn't have any other wives or anything else, because he wants to get married to his Turkish wife. This is a Turkish embassy. This is a Saudi embassy in Istanbul, Turkey. That man, while the woman that he loves waits outside, vanishes. He doesn't come out. Now, I can imagine what my wife would think in that moment if I walked into an embassy and I never walked out of the embassy. And the moment that I go to somebody and say, hey, where's Jamal? Where's Khashoggi? Where's Jamal? And they say, there's nobody here, ma'am. We have no idea what you're talking about. Saudi's initial story was that he left. He left. The prince, Mohammed bin Salman, even said, he's concerned about his safety. Saudis have just changed their story. They've just changed their tune. They're now owning up to the fact that Jamal Khashoggi is dead. And they've come up with a laughable story that Jamal Khashoggi was out there fighting like he knew some kind of jiu-jitsu or kung fu, the 18-man goon squad that was sent to essentially kill him. The reality of it is, Turkey immediately after his death knew that he was dead because they had bugged the consulate. They bugged the consulate. And they heard him being tortured and murdered, with his body being dismembered with a bone saw. The new Saudi story, repudiating their last story, where they didn't know what had happened to him, was now that he indeed had been murdered in a botched, I guess you could say, fight of sorts. Let's take a look at this story. This story is utter nonsense. Ultimately, this is false accountability. They are throwing several people to the wolves to not get at the person who ordered the hit. Essentially, the prince, the quote-unquote prince, Solomon, who most likely was the one who ordered the assassination of Khashoggi. Let's take a look at the story. I found the story to be absolutely and utterly amazing. So let's flip to this. So let's see. Right here. Saudi Arabia claims Khashoggi was killed in a fight contrary to other accounts. Yeah, contrary to Turkish accounts, because Turkey had the consulate bugged. Saudi Arabia now says the dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi died in a fight at its consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. A fight against 18 goons, mind you, thick-necked, thick-mustached goons who were sent there by Saudis to essentially kill the guy. Apparently, Jamal Khashoggi knew karate or was Neo from the Matrix. Its account contradicts its own earlier claim that Khashoggi left shortly after arriving at the consulate, meaning they lied previously. They knew that he had been killed earlier, and they just outright and utterly lied. The catch here is that the lie was so absurd that there was a certain perversity about making a lie in such a way. A man walks into your consulate, and that man vanishes. You would have been better off saying he was abducted by aliens as opposed to you having no idea what happened to the guy. Previous media reports citing Turkish officials said Jamal Khashoggi was tortured and dismembered. So right here. The government said that Khashoggi got into a fight with the people he met. It wasn't him meeting them. Those people were brought there for purpose. That purpose being to either kill or capture. We are uncertain as to which, but we know what did happen. He met at the consulate in Istanbul, Turkey on October 2nd. The kingdom alleged that Khashoggi died in that clash. I mean, he was murdered in that clash. Let's be clear. The explanation counters multiple reports of how Khashoggi died. Turkish officials told the New York Times that the audio evidence which proves Khashoggi was tortured, killed, and subsequently dismembered by a hit team of Saudi agents. Seeing as the Saudi agents did arrive and did immediately leave, I'm more inclined to believe Turkish accounts of this as opposed to these this weird and bizarre accounts of the guy fighting off or trying to fight a bunch of goons. It also contradicts Saudi's government's earlier accounts right here. Yeah, it also contradicts Saudi government's earlier accounts of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman previously told Bloomberg that the dissident journalist left the consulate shortly after he arrived. My understanding is that he entered and got out a few minutes or 1 hour. I'm not sure. We're investigating this through the foreign ministry to see exactly what happened at the time, he told Bloomberg. Here's the thing. CNN has an awesome quote here that I gotta have. After 18 days in which Saudi Arabia adamantly denied that any harm had come to Jamal Khashoggi at the consulate in Istanbul, it committed a startling about-face. It committed a startling about-face because the story that they were putting out was utter nonsense. Nobody believed that the man just vanished into thin air. And the fact that Turkey had to place bugged kind of belied any of these ideas that he just kind of walked out and just vanished and didn't say anything to the woman that he loved and that went to the consulate for in the first place. This is nonsense. Not only did Riyadh admit that Khashoggi came to a violent end, it pinned the blame on some of the closest aides of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler. The reality of the situation is that quote-unquote Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is likely the person that put forth the hit. Essentially a thug with billions of dollars. Tony Soprano with billions of dollars and oil money. These other underlings are essentially taking the rap for him. Let's keep going. In a flurry of coordinated statements issued at the dead of night in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia claimed Khashoggi's death was an accident. According to the Saudi press agency, preliminary investigations revealed that discussions between Khashoggi and the suspects currently detained by Saudi Arabia developed into a physical altercation that resulted in Khashoggi's death. Those responsible then tried to cover up the death, state media said. Now, Saudi Arabia has essentially detained the Goon squad that Saudi Arabia sent to kill Khashoggi. They've essentially detained the Goon squad. This gentleman, Ahmed Asiri, is also been fired. He's taken a hit. He's taken a rap. Asiri made frequent public appearances as a spokesperson for the Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen and was believed to have formed the team involved in Khashoggi's killing, sources told CNN. He played a key role in the arrests swept that rounded up hundreds of princesses and high-profile businessmen 1 year ago. The so-called anti-corruption drive generated over $100 billion in settlements. He's kind of a decent guy when he's not creating plans to murder and starve Yemenis. Gerald Feuerstein, a former U.S. ambassador to Yemen from 2010 to 2013, said of Asiri on Thursday. Feuerstein said it was extremely unlikely that Assyria would have acted against Khashoggi independently. There is no way he would take this on without coordinating with his boss. That sounds more right to me. That sounds more right. Kontani was also dismissed from his role as aide to the royal court, where he led where he led the Crown Prince's communications team. 2 weeks after Khashoggi's disappearance, he posted a tweet apparently responding to a widespread accusation that he was the mastermind of Khashoggi's killing. Do you think I would create something out of making of my own mind and my own direction? I am an employee and a faithful executor of the orders of the king and his highness and the faithful crown prince, he wrote. October 2017 tweet. It was an apparent answer to a theory first floated by Donald Trump this week that Khashoggi's death was a result of a rogue killing. Not so much. Not so much. One of the other interesting tidbits that's taken place in this is that one of the agents that were part of the Goon squad that killed Khashoggi ended up dying in a suspicious car crash. This is nonsense. This is utter and complete nonsense. This is false accountability. The fact is, this was likely ordered from the top, and that the people who are the underlings, who are just within the inner circle, are trying to take the blame in order to keep the blame from hitting the prince themselves. I suspect they know the reality is that they could be crucified if they said anything bad or anything out the way of this prince. We're still dealing with these people. These guys are maniacs. These guys are bloodthirsty maniacs. The idea that anybody could say anything about Iran and then turn around and be okay with Saudi Arabia is lunacy. It's like being okay with alcohol but hating marijuana. It's the guy who's likely running a country, who's supposedly a friend of ours, the country of the United States, put a hit out on a journalist that's lived in the United States and worked at one of the papers of record. Is there going to be a consequence for that behavior? Donald Trump is talking about sanctions, or potentially, somebody said something about sanctions. Lindsey Graham is flipping out. But at the end of the day, let's be very clear. Most likely, nothing will take place from the standpoint of any kind of actions. This is a point where we need to reevaluate our relationship and whether or not we want to be engaged and intertwined with roguish thugs and brutes that are willing to do this type of behavior. If we're being honest, the behavior in Yemen in and of itself should have been enough of a red flag to say that these people were willing to kill and murder and starve and weaponize disease in their aims of, you could say, putting that country or attacking. Yemen is weird because they're using it as this proxy for Iran, but even though it's not necessarily fully clear that the Houthis, or the relationship between the Houthis and Iran. Either way, people are being murdered, killed, starved. We are helping to do that. That in and of itself should have been enough to give us a red flag on whether or not we wanted to interact with Saudi Arabia. This is just another one of those red flags. The argument of the Saudis is that Khashoggi somehow knew karate, and the thick-necked brutes that got off the plane, the 18 thick-necked brutes that got off the plane, that he somehow got into a fight with them and died in the process. I am waiting for Turkey to release the audio tape. It's not that I want to hear it, but at the very least, it would put a rest to all of the nonsense that these maniacs are spewing. So, this video has gone longer than I wanted to, but let's see, who's here? Please stop repeating the regime change narrative. I have no idea what you're talking about. How come the outrage at the Saudis killing but silent about the attack on the Skerpels and the subsequent deaths of Dawn Sturgis at the hands of the Russians? Double standard. It's not a double standard. You have no proof that the Russians did it. That's the catch. Skip Rock. Democrat TV people to explain why they care about one and not the other. So the Republican base is already being fed propaganda saying that the MBS's brother was responsible for the murder. Whatever. Are you guys where England view a historic act of rural anarchy and lose? No, we're not going to be there by November 5th. In fact, I'm probably going to end up in Poland or somewhere. Pirate Alekis, when are you coming back to the United States? It's going to be several months. It's maybe 6 months, ideally, providing I don't crash back into the States. Skip Rock, I vote no as well. However, there is wrongdoing. We should at least speak out and do what we can. Yes. Robert Puke Ray Jamal, I wonder if the international community with us, with this instance against the United States. I don't know, man. This is... Saudi Arabia has been out there murdering and killing left and right. And we have been helping them in that pursuit. One guy gets murdered. And I suspect the reason why this is such a big deal is because it's so brazen. This isn't a wartime thing. Even if, yes, they could categorize war, whatever they want to categorize war. This is this kind of legal thing. This was just a hit. This was just an outright hit. So I don't know. There's some aspects of the international community that seems to be putting a freeze on the relationship. I think Australia decided to put a freeze on some kind of interactions with Saudi Arabia. But the United States is not going to do that. There is no way the United States is going to do that. No, it is because he was a Saudi spy who flipped. Okay. The pudgy journalist knew karate. It just keeps on. I didn't say he was pudgy. I'm saying they're acting as if the guy. 18 people get off of an airplane and within an hour get back on an airplane to go back to Saudi Arabia. And those people got off the airplane for purpose. They didn't bring a bone saw just to bring a bone saw. They brought a bone saw because they were going to use it. And they used it to torture and dismember Khashoggi. The argument that Khashoggi was somehow getting in a fight with these guys seems like nonsense to me. I think Turkey will hold people at the embassy and take them. Whoa, they're not at the embassy anymore. I mean, keep in mind, the people who are going back, the 18 Saudis, they've been arrested. So I call this false accountability. The reason I call it false accountability is that you had certain people who ordered a crime, and the people who ordered that crime to take place aren't necessarily being held accountable. You're getting underlings that are being held accountable. It's like when George Bush was ordering torture. Well, it was George Bush that was ordering the torture, even though it might have been like 3 people who took the rap for the things that George Bush essentially implemented, if that makes sense. All right. And they are protected by the corrupt system. Arcade, yes, they are. Because Donald Trump, even if he is politically forced into putting some level of sanctions in, he is not going to put anything in that's going to bite or cut to the nub. Turkey trying to force a deal with Saudi Arabia, from my understanding, at least everything that I read, part of the reason that Erdogan didn't necessarily want to come out full hog with this, and instead was giving it to reporters and all, was because he himself didn't necessarily want to deal with Saudi Arabia on that level. Meaning, he didn't want to make the accusation. He didn't want to be the one to push the point. He wanted the United States to push the point. What I suspect is that when Pompeo went to visit Saudi Arabia, Pompeo got across to him like, nobody is buying this. This is utter nonsense. And that you're going to have some level of accountability. And the accountability is somebody needs to take the hit for what took place. I strongly suspect that that's what happened. Civil disobedience. Turkey has a lot of leverage if they do have the tapes. Civil, I've been curious on why they haven't released those tapes. They've had some people say that they've heard the tapes and the tapes were gruesome, but I don't think they released the tapes. The recording is real. Recording is real. The man, the journalist, suffered greatly and had a lot of attention. Had his family connected to the Fayed family. There are a lot of journalists. I said it was pudging at you. Fair enough. Fair enough, Pat. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, this story blows me away. Like, look, I don't like the military settings, meaning this idea of us supporting this regime in the pursuit of carrying out war crimes in Yemen. Hate it. Absolutely hate it. And if the Khashoggi thing is one of those things that turns the world community against it, fair enough. I am, for whatever reason, the death of one seems to outnumber the many. Maybe because for the death of one, you could see his face. You could see the stuff that he wrote. You could see the fact that he went into the embassy and didn't come out the embassy. Like, it seems it's a startling case and a brazen case with a prodigious amount of hubris associated with it. It's fascinating. But I want to see the tape, or at the very least, I want to hear that tape. All right, I'm going to end this here. This one has gone way, way too long as is. He did look pudgy in the photos. He did. In fact, I have one of the photos here. Let's see. Solomon. There were other photos. This one I like the most, but at the same token, it's the saddest. He was going to marry her. All of this was to marry her. I don't know what she's going through right now, but I would imagine it is prodigious pain. So, yeah, I'm covering the story because I think the story is covering the story. Real News makes the argument that he bet on the wrong prince. Talking about Khashoggi? Or you're talking about Donald Trump? Yeah, Donald Trump bet on the wrong prince. I think they looked at the guy as a reformer. There's like, this guy's a reformer. Women are driving and all this other stuff. Forgetting the fact that the guy has, to some degree, unchecked power and billions of dollars. Yeah. Journalists get killed in Mexico all the time. It sees few people really pay attention to it. Well, I mean, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that this guy was murdered. I don't think it's necessarily one gets rid of the other. All right. Instead of calling an Arab leader crazy, think of why this would be. Gabriel Richmond. So when I use the term lunatic or psychopath, I use it more so in the sense of, well, I use it to some degree literal. Yeah, Khashoggi aligned himself with a prince. Where is it? Yeah, Khashoggi aligned himself with a prince that was on the MBS list. Well, Khashoggi was essentially writing scathing articles about MBS 6 months ago, a year ago, when he was jailed. Yeah, well, at that point, Khashoggi left. I mean, that was the point where Khashoggi, left. So he understood that he was, I think he understood he was in danger. I mean, in the stuff that I read, he had a certain degree of trepidation in even going to the embassy in the first place. So, yeah, the arms deal is not going anywhere. Trump has already said the arms deal is not going anywhere. He was like, is the guy an American? Here's the other catch. The communications had already been aped, meaning the United States had already knew the intentions of Saudi Arabia. So it is possible that Donald Trump knew that they were going to grab Khashoggi and didn't do anything about it. Yeah, this was brutal, man. This was very brutal. The Real News segment with that professor from the UCal was oddly informative. I'm going to have to check that out. Saudi Arabia is right now no longer a real government. Was it a real government before? I mean, you're talking about monarchs. It's like as if these people were somehow appointed by God. They're not appointed by anybody. They're kept in power by tons of money and weapons. Many of those weapons they get from us. So yeah. Divine right my ass. That's right, Tabitha. Divine right my ass. They must have been questioning him. Well, why would they cut his fingers off first? Yeah, I saw that. Wonder what he knew that was so vital. Well, here's the thing. I mean, you're assuming that they cut his fingers off because they were trying to get answers out of him as opposed to just torture him. Like, this may be one of those mob hit type things where the person wasn't necessarily information that the person had, but more so punishment for what the person was doing. If that makes sense. At this point, it's hard to know. He took it with him to his grave. But Jesus Christ. Oh, Lawrence of Arabia. So Lawrence of Arabia is fascinating because it's hard to know how much of Lawrence of Arabia's story is true. Like, it's possible that he's been embellishing a lot of the shit that he was saying. But that's a whole different story. That's a whole different story. All right. I'm going to end this here because this one is going way, way, way over limit. Have to understand who is telling the story, the point of view. Yes, that's very true. That's very true. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support the Patreon. Thanks all.